designed the original layout of the website using his graphic design skills.
Seriously? That's what Nancy was using, and she was self-dosing with.
I didn't realize that it wasn't just the people involved at the time, it was basically the culture. So we thought we showed people what was going on, and we did that. We thought this was a bad culture. And I think we started more people to come out to
What I really admire in her is her tenacity, her independence, and her courage to do things that are not necessarily things she's used to doing.
In 2020, Nancy was awarded the First Amendment Award by the state chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists for her coverage. Her son, Eric, echoes how brave Nancy is.
What I understood about my mother is that fighting him only means to fight harder. She will, she will work hard on this fight. I see the effects that the whole operation had on Norwalk. It makes me very proud. It's like the last thing that I got to do with my dad, and like with my mom. And it helped the whole city. It feels good to think about that.
But I got to see Norwalk. Sherry changed from a rundown, dysfunctional place and to this place where there's things growing all over the place. We knew we were shaking up the city. Powerful people are not going to be happy with us. We're just learning truthful things.
Nancy's journey into local journalism wasn't straightforward. In 2012, after moving to Norwalk, 2 years later, Nancy and her late husband, Mark Chapman, launched NancyOnNorwalk.com. Mark was the editor, and their son, Eric Chapman, designed the original layout of the website using his graphic design skills.
Well, we're driving up.
You can see a lot of dysfunction. People don't realize that it wasn't just the people involved at the time, it was basically the culture.
I think I know the first year where it is.
And we did that. We thought this was a bad culture. I think we started more people to come out to and talk about it.
What I really admire in her is her tenacity, her independence, and her courage to do things that are not necessarily things she's used to doing.
In 2020, Nancy was awarded the First Amendment Award by the state chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists for her coverage. Her son, Eric, echoes how brave Nancy is.
What I understood about my mother is that fighting him only means to fight harder. She will, she will work hard on this fight. I see the effects that the whole operation had on Norwalk. It makes me very proud. It's like the last thing that I got to do with my dad, and like with my mom. And it helped the whole city. It feels good to think about that.
But I got to see Norwalk. Sherry changed from a rundown, dysfunctional place and to this place where there's things growing all over the place. We knew we were shaking up the city. Powerful people are not going to be happy with us. We were just learning truthful things.
I know.
Flowers, they totally.
I know, that's me.
That was the last. You've been here before. We were just looking. Oh, really? Oh, okay.
That's her.
That's great. Yeah.
Grief, our hope, our memories. A death asks that we stop the onrush of activities, pause for a little while, and reflect. Today, we also acknowledge generational loss, a parent. Parents give us roots and give us wings. Losing a parent leaves an empty place in our hearts. The loss of a mother, a daughter, a sister, cousin, aunt, or old friend represents a loss of a link to the past. We may feel temporarily adrift. A feeling of permanence in a changing world is suddenly shattered. And yet, at the same time, there is a sense of continuity and connectedness in our memories and reflections of our past and of the circle of life. And so, Eric, you can now promise that you will take the best of what you inherited from your mother, the support, the dedication, the strength, the choices, the mistakes, the struggles, and the successes all have formed you into who you are. Though this is a very sad occasion, in it there can also be a depth of joy that brings wisdom and strength. The lessons to be learned lie in the life that was lived. Every life is special. Every life has a purpose and meaning. Every life is to be protected and celebrated. An individual is but a brief episode in history, but humanity is renewed in every generation by the undying spark of life. We are, each of us, greater than ourselves. We survive in the children we create and the memories we have made with others. We endure in the humanity we serve. The cold days of winter are passing. They're not passing quick enough. And soon, the forsythia will be blooming, welcoming the renewal of nature of every spring. Every living thing perishes, but life itself persists. In the circle of life, change is inevitable, and no one can escape this rhythm of life. But our loved ones leave their gifts. We still bask in their love. We still use their instruction. We are still inspired by their deeds, and we still linger on the memories of them. Death is part of the drama of life, but so is the loving tribute of remembrance. So I call on Nancy Schulins, a friend and colleague, to share with us Nancy's inspiring life story. She probably wouldn't have described herself as inspirational, but she was, and as so many of you have shared online and can attest today.
Writing is a lonely business. It's especially lonely at night when most of your readers are sleeping. Nancy Chapman wrote at night after the endless meetings ended and the elected officials had gone home to bed. She wrote at night partly because she was a night owl, but also because she wanted her readers to be able to wake up in the morning and find out what had transpired in Norwalk while they were busy living their lives. Sitting through endless meetings and staying up all night writing about them was Nancy's life. That and making phone calls, answering emails, tracking down leads, deciphering court rulings, examining budgets, and all the rest of the difficult, tedious, unglamorous work of being a watchdog journalist, a job at which Nancy excelled. 7 or 8 years ago, my friend Claire, a former board chair of Nancy on Norwalk, approached me about becoming a consulting editor to Nancy. I hesitated. an alumnus of the world's largest news gathering organization advising the founder of one of the smallest? How would we find common ground? There turned out to be more common ground than I thought. Along with our first names, an abiding love of all things purple, we had both learned our trade on the job. We had both married journalists named Mark, who'd had our backs. And though we clashed here and there, in our early years, I followed AP style while Nancy followed whatever the heck that was. We both loved the rush that came with chasing a good story, never more so than when we were beating the pants off the other guys. It soon became obvious that my mentee had a formidable mind, relentless curiosity, and a work ethic that just wouldn't quit. Clearly, this woman had come to play. I began waking up Sunday mornings to emails from Nancy, asking me to look at stories she'd finished writing as the sun was coming up. Invariably, her stories reflected an encyclopedic knowledge of Norwalk and an institutional memory of events that had transpired long ago. So while Nancy went to sleep, I went to work, typing in my little style corrections, smoothing language that struck me as rocky, and trimming what I felt needed trimming. There was a lot of trimming. This went on for a time while we found our rhythm, as writers and editors do. Then, along the margins of the stories she sent me to edit, Nancy took to preempting my questions by shooting them down before I'd had a chance to ask them. She did this with remarkable accuracy and a sly wit that I missed terribly. Nancy's own story began on May 1st, 1959, in Somers Point, New Jersey, where she was born Nancy Eileen Gunther, one of 4 children of Clarence and Eileen Gunther. Nancy's curiosity surfaced early when she and her cousin Bruce decided to investigate Nancy's next-door neighbor, which happened to be the Atlantic City Airport. With no fence to impede them, the preschoolers set off for the airfield. By the time their frantic mothers began searching for them, a Jeep carrying Nancy and Bruce came back across the field. A fence went up shortly after. Nancy grew up in Cologne, New Jersey. Shortly before graduating from high school, she married Mark Chapman, a seasoned journalist. The reception took place at the Germania Volunteer Fire Department Hall, where during the last song of the night, the fire whistle went off. Several guests, including the bride's father, raced out in their party clothes to fulfill their obligations as volunteer firemen. Nancy and Mark, who had worked for numerous newspapers, created an online news site in Englewood, Florida. That site, Englewood Edge, would become the precursor to Nancy on Norwalk. After leaving Florida for Connecticut in 2012, the Chapmans launched Nancy on Norwalk as a joint venture with their son Eric as webmaster. In 2014, the fledgling enterprise was granted nonprofit status as Chapman Hyperlocal Media, Inc. 2 years later, when Mark died suddenly at age 63, it abruptly became a one-woman operation. With Eric's support and that of Nancy on Norwalk's board of directors, Nancy forged ahead, training her focus on city government, education, and land use. She became a common sight in and around City Hall, a tousle-haired woman in plaid shirts and purple fleece. Without Mark, her workload essentially doubled, yet Nancy said she found the work soothing. Soothing. The digital town square that was the comments section of Nancy on Norwalk was not exactly a love-in. I marveled at Nancy's ability to maintain an even keel, even in the face of abusive comments directed at her. Eric set me straight. What nobody seems to understand, he said, is that fighting her only makes her fight harder. No kidding. There was a wellspring of fortitude in Nancy that surfaced when needed, as when she pursued the story that earned her the highest honor of her career. The story on former state Senate candidate Mark D'Amelio's arrest for drunk driving, published again despite a threatened lawsuit, captured the prestigious 2018 First Amendment Award from the Connecticut Society of Professional Journalists, becoming the first hyperlocal news organization to win it for what judges called tremendous determination and courage in reporting in the face of direct threats and litigation. Absent the accolades and awards, Nancy loved what she did. A few months ago, looking back on her career, she said, "I had a blast. I worked too hard, but it was fun." The last time I visited with Nancy, we talked about dying and the fear that surrounds it. The fear of being forgotten, all our little successes and achievements erased, as if we had never existed. The fear of finding out that there is no point to life, that it's all just a random collection of letters that spell nothing. But we agreed, if you can conceive and create something that outlasts you, a home, a family, an artwork, a website, you start to see patterns of order and purpose. You start to see yourself as part of a larger story. There's a proverb that says the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Nancy Chapman was a gift to the people of Norwalk. There should have been more stories, more accolades, more smart-ass comments in the margins, more life. Even so, the life she lived was proof that, armed with curiosity, intelligence, and grit, an unassuming woman in purple can leave her mark, if not on the whole world, then certainly on her corner of it. Just as she honored her late husband's legacy, it will now be up to others to honor hers by continuing the difficult, tedious, unglamorous work that meant so much to her and her adopted city, by planting the trees under whose shade we do not expect to sit.
Thank you, Nancy. So this afternoon, we're also going to hear from her brother Clarence, son Eric, friends John Levin, Claire Schoen, and colleague Doug Hardy. So Clarence, please.
Good morning, or afternoon now, I guess. On behalf of the family, we thank all of you for attending today. We thank you for all the support you offered to Nancy during her illness. And we thank the people that arranged this service today. I'm her older brother. I'm the first of four. That's us over here. It's my mother, my sister Barbara, my nephew Zach, Nancy's son Eric, her younger brother Michael, and my wife Valerie. My wife Valerie is a copy editor. She greatly appreciated your description of the copy editor sequence. So anyway, I've known Nancy all my life, except for the part when you're really small and you don't remember anything, but she was 2 years younger than me. Let me see. We did the airplane story already. She was into art and drawing all her life. From a very young age, she drew. I can barely draw a stick figure. You know, she could do all this stuff behind me. She spent a lot of time traveling back and forth between Norwalk and South Jersey, where we live. So that explains the Jersey Turnpike series that are on display. And as a child, we all liked watching Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which explains Richard Basehart hanging from an overhead hatch. The other stuff, I have no idea. As part of her drawing stuff in the 8th grade, she did the 8th grade middle school yearbook logo and design. She did all the artwork for it. She was better at school than I was. She actually got better grades than I did. As was pointed out earlier, the wedding was at the firehouse. which was upstairs from where the apparatus was. So when the whistle went off, they all just ran down the stairs. And just so you know, it was not much of a fire. It was basically a campfire that got a little bit out of control, and they knocked it down in no time at all. I'm not entirely sure how Mark got into journalism. When I met him, originally he was erecting the tent at the music theater, and he was doing tent work. And somehow he got into journalism. He worked his way up to being the travel editor at the Boston Globe, which at the time was a big newspaper. And Nancy got on writing freelance stories about travel editing. So I know that she went to Africa. I know she did sell quite a few cruises, one of which was for South America, Rio de Janeiro and Argentina, I think. She took my mother along for that one. According to this, she went somewhere where you could pet baby harp seals. I guess that was Nova Scotia. Part of her travel, her writing, actually, she went to write a story about dude ranches in Montana. And so she's out in Montana, and they got her up on the horse, and she gets thrown from the horse. Well, she didn't know anything about riding a horse, but she gave it a try. And she broke a couple of ribs, and she was stranded out there for a week or so until she could make her way back to us living in Val and I were living in the Chicago area. So she rode the train all the way from Montana to Chicago. We collected her, and then Mark showed up like 3 hours later, driving up all the way from Florida to collect her and take her the rest of the way. But she was in no condition to travel, so she stayed with us for a couple of weeks. At some point, she had to be rehospitalized for a day because the ribs were deflating her lung or something, so they had to do something. So she's in the hospital, and she's filling in all the paperwork, and they get to the thing, well, what religion are you? I guess they do services, I guess. So she's like, Wiccan. You can just see the eyes rolling. So eventually, she got hospitalized. Once she started feeling better with the aid of Vicodin, she insisted on going into Chicago to do some sightseeing. I'm not sure if that was her idea or our idea, but anyway, it was her idea. So anyway, we dragged her down there, and we did some touristy thing, and there's a photograph that we did not share of her like at the cruise ship with the little the life preserver, and the name of the ship, and everyone else there, and she looked absolutely ghastly. But she pale, anyway, we didn't share that photograph, but she wanted to do it, and we made it happen for her. So anyway, I guess I'll wrap this up with the story of how her and Mark met, since I was there. She was 16 or so, 17, between her junior and senior year in college, somewhere in that age. And she got her in her head that she wanted to work at the Smithville Music Theater, which was in South Jersey. This is before the casinos. And it was basically the theater was like this concrete kind of pit in the ground, and they put a tent over it, and in the summertime they would have stage shows, productions. And Mark, so she goes there to see about getting a job, and they say, well, go talk to that guy. And it was Mark Chapman, and he was the guy in charge of rigging the tent. He had skills in that area, and basically all the backstage stuff. He was sort of the everyday person there, while various people shuttled in and out. And so I got drafted into taking her there since I had the driver's license, and I don't think she had one yet, or she had a permit, I'm not sure. And so we drive over there. It's about things I wanted to do afterwards. Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And I figured this would take like 15, 20 minutes. Well, they were there like 2 hours. I'm sitting in the back like, what are they doing up there? Well, it turns out they were getting to know each other. They were falling in love. So anyway, and that's how all this started. I'm kind of running out of things to say. I could probably stand here and just babble on, but that's all I wrote down as notes. Thank you all for coming. On to the next person.
This is a really difficult time for me, and first I want to thank everyone for coming. I don't know, I thought about what I wanted to say here for a while, and as usually happens with me, I deal with difficult circumstances with humor. So, I don't know, it's been important for me to maybe give people a glimpse into the sides of Nancy, Mom, that a lot of people might not have known. Because you all read her work, and you met her in person when she was out doing her thing. But you know, there was a lot to her. She contained multitudes. So yeah. So I'll start. On May 1st, 1977, in southern New Jersey, as Clarence was just saying, what's going on with the sound? Sure.
All right now.
Hello? Okay.
Better.
All right. Yeah, so on May 1st, 1977, in southern New Jersey, Nancy Gunther turned 18 years old. 3 weeks later, she married Mark and became Nancy Chapman. 1 year and 1 week later, I was born. I remained Nancy's only child, and I was smaller then. Mom was still becoming an adult and getting to know herself when I was a small child. And she had a lot of big ideas about how she wanted to go about being Mom. She wanted to make all of my clothing by hand, starting with the diapers, I'm told. That didn't last. And of course, she couldn't do all of that by herself, so she bought some clothes. But she did make a bunch of the stuff that I ran around in when I was little. I remember going to the fabric store in Hyannis, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, where I did most of my growing up. There was this one really weird pair of shorts in particular that I remember that was brightly colored, like purple and blue and yellow and everything. It was a psychedelic pattern. I don't know, I think the fabric was on sale, so that's what I got. She was also very concerned about what we, the three of us, put in our bodies. She was determined not to give me any junk food ever. She also made a lot of cakes. So I never got sugary cereals. What she was determined to raise me on was the sort of thing that you would find at a health food store in the 1980s. I don't know if anyone in this room knows what wheat germ tastes like, but it's something like if you crossed Wheaties cereal with sawdust, and she would mix that with plain yogurt and feed it to her small child, who was very reluctant to eat it. She also gave me tofu. Imagine feeding a small child tofu. And I'm told that you can cook tofu in a way that makes it tasty, but I assure you she did not know that way to cook it. I kind of thought it was a lot more like snot. We meaning my father and I, used to joke about that period because we sort of thought it was probably responsible for some of the explosive height growth that I experienced. It was like she fed me fertilizer. And I grew and grew and grew and grew. Say what you want, but Mom did know how to make things grow. She was a wizard with plants. We had a garden in our backyard that had rows of crops. I'm talking about food. I'm talking about potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc. And of course, because I grew up with this, I thought everyone had that. I used to go and help her in the garden when I was little, you know, the way little kids try to help with everything. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in the way. I was counterproductive, to say the least. But yeah, I was out there enjoying it. And then a couple years ago, during the pandemic, I ended up trying to do the same thing myself in my Brooklyn apartment. I bought myself a big freestanding hydroponic garden, and I set about growing my own crops inside a small Brooklyn apartment. And my tomato plant got about 7 feet tall before it all went terribly wrong and ended up in a garbage bag. I am going to try again, though. As you all know, she was very interested in photography, because you've seen a lot of it. But that interest in photography actually predates her writing in a journalistic fashion. When I was a kid, she had her own dark room, which is something that no one has anymore, in the house to develop the photographs that she took. And I would, of course, little kid, want to help, would often run in there. And I can tell you that room had a chemical smell I cannot describe. But I learned a lot. It was fascinating. She would like shine a light through the film. It would project an image onto the paper in negative. And then she would just kind of tap it in this chemical solution, and slowly the photo would appear. This is all, of course, archaic technology now. At one point, as Clarence said, Mom's talent for photography led to a trip to Africa, which was kind of a life-changing experience for her. So, in all these little stories, there's kind of a theme developing, right? That Mom had her own ideas and her own way of doing pretty much everything. She wanted to do a lot of things herself. She wanted to figure it out herself. She wanted to build it herself. There were so many half-finished home modifications to our house in Hyannis. It was a lot. She wanted to be self-reliant, but in a lot of ways she couldn't be. She grew up insecure. She had trouble talking to people she didn't know, except my dad, apparently. But she couldn't wait to get out and see the world, and so she took her chances in 1977 on a guy from out of town who happened to be my father. I don't think she knew that at the time. I owe a lot of who I am to Mom, Nancy, in ways that it took me a long time to realize I was okay with admitting. Much of my identity was crafted by her, just like the shorts and the tomatoes. And I came out a little weird, just like the shorts and the tomatoes. Mom was a little weird too. Mom was into a lot of new agey stuff. You might not have known that. I know there's some Darwin Society people here. I never really followed her that far into that. But when I was little, a psychic told her she was a dolphin in a past life, and she went around making dolphin noises with her mouth for years. Mom's why I'm a big science fiction fan. She was really into Star Trek from the days of the original series on broadcast television.
which I think was the 60s. We watched Star Trek The Next Generation in the late 80s and early 90s together on TV. And so much of that, when I go back and watch that now, like the big moral quote out of the captain turns out to be some principle I've been living my life to this whole time. It's crazy. And maybe you can imagine what I thought when, as a child, I was exploring my grandmother's house, and I found a set of photographic slides with pictures of my mom dressed up in a full Klingon costume. It was complete with a fake mustache, just riding on top of a big smile. And this was before that was like normalized by conventions and stuff like that. This was more of Mom doing things her own way. Mom encouraged me to be creative. She was an artist. That's why there are paintings. As Clarence was saying, it was important to me that you got to see that. I wanted to bring more. Some of them were in New Jersey, and I wasn't able to get down there because of illness. This is just what I found in her apartment when I came to help her with her cancer fight. We talked about getting her an art show in Norwalk so that people could see this side of her, but it never came about because she never thought it was good enough or that her stuff was ready to be shown. This was a common thing with Mom, and I think that's why I'm telling you all this. Like Mom, I tend to want to do things my own way, and I'm a bit of a contrarian. So, like Mom, sometimes I'll do things strangely, just to be different. When Nancy on Norwalk published a notice about this memorial, there was a quote from her about what a memorial should be, which was to celebrate the life of someone by telling good stories about the effect that person had on people. I, however, have decided to do the opposite. I'm going to tell you about the effect that Norwalk had on her. So as I said, Mom had trouble believing in herself. She often, in social situations, would just sort of fade into the background and let my dad do all the talking. My dad was a very charismatic, gregarious sort of person. And she was just more comfortable that way. She never wanted to be the center of attention. She liked to write, but never wanted to show anyone anything that she wrote. She would freak out if she caught me or my father looking while she was writing. My dad always believed in her, though, and he is responsible for getting her into journalism. He got her the job, he coached her, and until this Nancy came along, he was the only mentor that she really had in journalism. So we were in Florida, and the 2008 financial crisis happened, and they were both laid off from their newspaper jobs. And my temporary gig as a teacher at the art school that I ended up going to ended. We didn't have a lot to do, so we started Angled Edge, as Nancy was saying, which ended up being the prototype for Nancy on Norwalk. It was not successful. We got a lot of support from, well, we got a lot of people telling us that they really liked what we were doing, but not much actual tangible support. So it didn't last. We ended up moving up here, where they were able to get new journalism jobs, and I came with. A couple years later, Mom quit her job in anger because, well, her editor at the time didn't appreciate, I think, the way she was writing. Because Mom wanted to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, etc. And she had a very clear idea of what was important. And they wanted fast crap. I will not name who this was, but I doubt even anyone would know. So that was when I started building Nancy on Norwalk. I came up with the name. It was kind of a funny moment. They were like, well, what are we going to call this thing? And I was like, obviously we're going to call it Nancy on Norwalk. They were like, what? No. Really? I was like, yeah. Okay, that's kind of catchy. Okay. A little later, Dad got laid off, and it became what they were both doing. Again, just like before in Florida. What followed was a completely unintended adventure that lasted the rest of both of their lives. Unlike our earlier attempt, this one was built around how Mom did her reporting and around her as a human being. And I think that helped everyone connect to it more. It was more human. And Mom struggled with it. She struggled with the attention. Nancy Schulens here was talking about how the comment section could be a little spicy. And Mom didn't take it well early on. She used to say, everybody hates me. And I mean, it got to her. But my father was always quick to correct her. Like, no, you did nothing wrong. They're just mad because you got it right. I did my best to encourage her too. And then when Dad died, well, for one thing, neither one of us saw it coming. It actually happened in my apartment. They had just come to visit, and we were going to go out to dinner. And yeah, he died. And we were both lost after that. She didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. She didn't think she could continue. And she didn't think she could handle any criticism on her own or all the writing duties. But the people of Norwalk saw her value and wouldn't let her stop. They would not let my mother give up on herself. Partly because the work she was doing was good, and I think it was helping Norwalk. And because they liked her. Never mind what the comments said. And so over the next seven years, my mom changed. She got better at speaking for herself. She found confidence in her writing and the direction she was taking. She never stopped fearing that the whole thing could fall apart at any moment, or that she needed an escape plan just in case. But thanks to all the community help she had, it was never really necessary. She dreaded going to public functions earlier on, expecting to run into people that hated her, that would come up and confront her. And then she'd come home with a big smile on her face, having had a grand old time socializing and getting to know everybody. And it just kept going like that, just like my dad knew it could, and like he always told her, until eventually she settled into it. Even at the end, though, she still couldn't really wrap her head around how much support there was. When I was taking care of her, either by visiting in the hospital or at home in my apartment that I got to help take care of her, I'd remind her how many people she had posting supportive comments on the website, and the small army of people that self-organized to help her and to help me help her. Everyone's on your side, Mom, I'd say. Norwalk loves you, Mom. And she'd respond incredulously, I know, it's unbelievable. How is all this for me? My mom was a shy but intelligent Jersey girl, and Norwalk gave her a home. It wasn't what she planned, but Norwalk was where she found herself writing for a living. in a way that she never thought she could. And she was able to do it on her own. She's a totally different person today than she was 10 years ago when we came here. It meant so much to her, and it means a lot to me. Norwalk helped her find the inner strength she didn't know she had. I want to thank you for that. All right, switching gears here just a little bit. Everyone knows cancer is a scary thing. You don't really understand that until you see it up close. And I spent about a year taking care of Mom in and out of the hospital. She actually beat cancer once before. A lot of people don't know that. In 2000 to 2001, while I was having my freshman year at college, she had cancer and was treated successfully. She beat it then, and they never told me. My parents never told me this shit. It wasn't until I came home for summer vacation after the freshman year, I was like, by the way, your mom almost died. What? It never made sense to her, you know. She ate healthy. She was really into health food. Everything, you know, had to be organic. Later in life, she went full vegan. She never smoked. She very rarely drank, and when she did, she didn't do it to much excess. Somehow the cancer didn't care about that or how health conscious she was. She was working out a few times a week at a gym when the cancer started to present symptoms. It's just not fair, man. That's all I have.
I wrote this, otherwise it would be a horrific ramble. Thank you, Eric, for sharing so much. I just learned a lot about your mom. This is hard. I first met Nancy 12 years ago when Diane Loricella introduced us at Penny's Diner during a planning meeting for something. Diane said, "John, this is Nancy. She's our future." Of course, I had no idea then, but she was right. I joined the board of Nancy on Norwalk, and we became friends. We shared some crazy times. Nancy had such a hard job and not enough help to do it. So I would offer to take pictures of events in Norwalk, and sometimes she used them. Nancy's reputation grew, and it got to the point where she was getting a constant stream of tips from people in Norwalk about one thing or another, but she was super private and super professional, and she never disclosed her sources and never said what she was working on. One time, she was told by some residents that there was something strange going on with the lights at Manresa Power Plant at night. So Nancy was like, "Gotta investigate that." So she tells me we had to go to Shorefront Park at night and get as close to Manresa as we could to take pictures of whatever was going on and figure out what it was. This was a year ago. It was in January. It was freezing. But Nancy, being Nancy, was absolutely determined to get this crazy-ass story. And she did. You can read about it in Nancy on Norwalk. Nancy was absolutely relentless, and I loved that about her. There was no such thing as quitting. And she knew from her own personal experience that the world was a crazy place and that people were crazy too. So Nancy was often reticent, but she had this eye roll that just spoke volumes. It was classic Nancy because she had no need to say anything. The eye roll said it all. And, you would see her doing the eye roll and you would know, like, so-and-so is being completely ridiculous, which, of course, is completely normal for them. That was in the eye roll. So much of Nancy's life was work and struggle. But God, there were some good times too, and she enjoyed being happy and having a good laugh. And most of the nonsense that she was confronted with at Nancy on Norwalk was super aggravating. Comments, for example. And she worried, yes, but she never panicked, and she was able to laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. And she really embraced the fun side too. Like there was this April 1st article in Nancy on Norwalk announcing that the Sono collection was shutting down, and that Norwalk Community College was going to take it over for a new campus. That morning, Nancy got a blizzard of phone calls from the attorneys at Brookfield, who's the owner of the mall, promising to sue her. And Nancy rolls her eyes, laughed, and dealt with it, as a professional journalist and publisher, and, did what, dealt with it. Nancy really, she loved life, and she wanted more of it. And she was really angry and sad that she would not get that. Nancy was only 65 and sharp as a tack, and she had all of her smarts. She loved her family. She loved her cats. There's a cat story. I'm going to go to an aside. Nancy really loved her cats. And in fact, she loved every cat. And I know that at her mom's house in South Jersey, which is, I understand to be semi-rural, there were many feral cats in the neighborhood. So of course Nancy had to adopt all of them, and took to feeding them, and naming them, and photographing them. And one day I saw her, and she had scratches all over both arms. And I said, Nancy, what happened? She said, one of the cats. I said, what? What happened? She said, well, I've been taking care of the cats in the neighborhood. And she said, one of them scratched me. I said, what? How was it going to scratch you? She said, well, I picked it up. What? She said, well, I had to show it where the food was. Nancy, these are feral cats. That is their job to know where the food is. But anyway, Nancy had her own way of doing things, and, come, hell or high water, she was going to get it done. Anyway, she loved her family, she loved her cats, and yes, she loved her job. And through that, she touched so many people in Norwalk, including so many people that never even met her, yet still knew her, and loved her. The legacy of what Nancy and Mark created, and Eric created, will live on. What a profound gift to us all. Thank you, Nancy.
Wow. There's not a lot that hasn't been covered in who Nancy was, but I'm Claire Schoen. I'm a member of the Nancy and Norwalk team. I was on the board for a while. I served as board president for a while. I'm now what everyone's calling me, a staunch volunteer. Because I just refused to let go because Nancy it was so infectious working with her to want to make it better and to cover Norwalk in a way that Norwalk needs to be covered. So I've known Nancy for 8 years. Originally sort of professionally, and then I grew to know her pretty well personally. I had a lot of words I jotted down to describe her when I was trying to figure out what to say, and I'm just going to rattle through these quickly because I know I'm not completely on time. She was courageous. Her decision to keep publishing after losing Mark was, in my mind, phenomenal. That's when I first met her, and it was like, what am I going to do? She's lost her life partner, her business partner. She had Eric to support her, but Eric was grieving also. And it took an amazing amount of courage in my mind. She was honest, almost to a fault. And isn't that really what we want in a reporter? She was kind, she was shy, and she was obstinate. You push her too much and she'd push back even harder. But she was a gentle soul, as our dog Maisie can attest, because cats are not the only creatures that she loved or that loved her back. And I actually put some pictures of Maisie like on Nancy's shoulder to show that, because she just had a thing with animals. She was wicked smart. She told me once she was third in her class of several hundred in high school, which I totally believe. And I think she is the only person in Norwalk who understood the ins and outs of the Jason Milligan Poco lawsuit. Which leaves us a little in the dark at Nancy and Norwalk right now. She was pretty tech savvy and would always solve the problems if Eric wasn't around to help, but she wasn't so good at taking care of the hardware. And I don't know how many keyboards the board bought for her, but I think we had to replace them, and I think it had something to do with the number of cats that would walk across the keyboard while she was working. She was absent-minded. At times, she and I just laughed over the fact that we both could easily lose driver's licenses, and she lost more computer mice than I didn't know was possible. She was creative, she was curious, she was a loyal friend, she was funny, cat lover, vegan, loved the color purple. But I got to know her over time, and I realized that a lot of it was text and email because our schedules were so skewed. She would go to sleep until 1 and go to work around 6. Originally, I was working full-time, and a lot of it was over text or email. But we would try to get out and walk or drive, and John, actually, I have a similar story to Manresa. There was one time I was driving her home, and we saw a ton of fire engines and police and emergency vehicles headed towards the water near Commerce Street, which is where King Industries is. And Nancy's like, we gotta find out what's going on. And we drive over there, and as we're driving, we realize that if there's a fire at King Industries, we would be blown up to New Haven. And we just turned around and left. So she liked to make the job fun. She loved Norwalk. We've already heard all about that. But one night, I used to do this thing called nerding out, where I would look at like minutes of meetings, past meetings, and send her ideas for stories. And she sends me a text, and she says, check out the sleeping secretary. And she'd sent me a screenshot of a Zoom meeting, and in the upper corner, one of the commissioners of whatever board this was just completely sleeping. So that's the kind of fun. She was really an interesting and complicated individual, but really funny, and we love to gossip about Norwalk politics. As much as she loved Norwalk, she loved you guys, and she loved South Jersey. And she did everything she could to get down there. I don't know how much the Norwalk community knows that she worked almost entirely from South Jersey during COVID. And her dream was to be able to be an advisor to Nancy and Norwalk and live with Mom and Barbara and down in South Jersey, and we were actually getting her there. She used to call me Pollyanna because she would come and say, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And it was a really interesting relationship. I miss her a lot. One more story. She hated filling out forms like we all do, or dealing with banks, or dealing with bureaucrats. And in 2021, I discovered there was money available for independent contractors. And at the time, she was still an independent contractor because we couldn't afford to put her on salary and guarantee we'd have that money every year. So she was classified as an independent contractor. She didn't believe she would qualify for this. I have a job. You're paying me. I'm like, well, we're not paying you enough, and you qualify, so fill out the form. She texted for help, and we went back and forth about details about how she should classify what she does and everything. And we were almost at the end, and I get this text back saying, "I'm going to jail." Jail. She's like, "It's a scam." And she was equally skeptical of paid family leave. She just didn't think she deserved it. And I'm like, "Nancy, yes." So she didn't get the COVID money, but she also didn't go to jail. And I think actually she filled out the form wrong on purpose. But like Eric said, over time, I watched her personal and professional confidence grow. And one of my most bittersweet memories was taking her to Norwalk Hospital more than a year ago. The ER nurse was checking her in, asking her name, address, all that other stuff. And I turned to her and I said, "Did you read Nancy on Norwalk?" She goes, "Oh God, yes, every day, I love it. In fact, you guys should check out." I said, "This is Nancy." And the nurse was very impressed, and Nancy beamed. And I was like, I think she finally did understand the impact she had on this community and was really proud of what she had accomplished. I'm just really sorry to cry. I'm sorry she's not around to enjoy it more. She was one of a kind. I miss her.
Hey everybody, my name is Doug Hardy, and I run a website called CT News Junkie. And I met Nancy probably 14 or 15 years ago when they first launched Nancy on Norwalk. They were a great team, and they covered the news. They believed in the work. Eric had built this really nice website. Sure, let me step a little closer. Sorry about that. Oh, I can hear it now. All right. Eric had built this really nice website, and they were great journalists, and they just started out in a period of time when people had just started kind of turning their back on the profession. It's not an easy thing to do to launch a small business, even with a good market. And they launched a business, a hard business, when a lot of other ones were collapsing in the same sector. So they were pretty brave to do it. Nothing is ever easy when you're wearing 15 or 20 different hats every day, all the while trying to do this public service journalism thing that we do as if we've still got 40 people in a newsroom around us, but we're really just sitting in our home office, kind of pretending that we have this group of people around us supporting us. They did it really well. Running Nancy on Norwalk is a huge lift. Running any one of these businesses is an enormous lift, as the people who are still doing it will attest. It requires a single-minded focus, and that comes with a lot of stress. It tests our relationships. There's a cost to it. And Nancy certainly paid that price. But we have this, we've caught this bug, this people that do this work. We just have this unwavering focus on spreading the truth, shining the light on institutions and transparency and things like that, because it matters. It matters to society, and it's an honor to do it. Anyway, we had met because along with CT News Junkie, I was running this with a partner. I was running this little ad network. We were trying to share ad revenue to help people like Nancy and Mark get off the ground. It lasted for about 3 years. We would send revenue checks. They weren't huge, but I think they were helpful to most of the folks that were in the network. It was called the Independent Media Network, and we kind of focused on those refugees, those print newspaper refugees, and there were a lot of them. I think at the time, at its peak, I think we had, I want to say 50 different publications, almost all of them in Connecticut. There was 1 or 2 in Boston. But so there was this groundswell of small business innovation going on in the news industry back then. And, it was an honor to help. It was an honor to be part of it. And the neat thing was Nancy on Norwalk was the first one to join our network. So it meant a lot. let's see, we kind of evangelized the idea that online news was the future. I still kind of believe that. It's just still really hard, though. Their challenges were our challenges. Their concerns were our concerns. We spoke the same newsroom language of cynicism and irreverence and gallows humor. You could pick up the phone with either one of them, and it would just feel like you're talking to somebody, you know, that you've been working with in a newsroom. I don't know. It's a shared language. There's a kinship there, and they were in our wheelhouse. We felt really close. Anyway, more than 90% of those publications are gone. And the remarkable thing is that Nancy on Norwalk is still here. And the New Haven Independent is still here. And CT News Junkie is still here. 20 years in this business is a miracle. It is absolutely a miracle. We reinvent ourselves every couple years. And even after her passing, Nancy on Norwalk is still going, and perhaps in better shape now than it ever has been. And that's a credit to her and the folks who do the work here. It's what I would call a miracle, and it's one of several that Nancy kind of willed into, into being. So, cutting through here, I don't want to repeat some of the things that folks have said. So there was one miracle that I want to share. People have already mentioned that she won the First Amendment Award. I should say this in advance here. In the news industry, reporters are rarely faced with legal challenges. It really doesn't happen very often at all, because we do what we do pretty well. And people take it for granted, but we do it about 1,000 times before anybody complains. You know, we do a lot of stories. But in most cases, people who get sued, reporters who get sued, they have an employer who's got a lawyer on retainer. There's never a question. It's never gonna impact them personally. They're never gonna go after them personally, make them personally liable. However, that is not the case in the world of independent news. So if you can't afford an attorney or you don't have insurance, you're really kind of facing an existential crisis if somebody sends you a lawsuit, somebody sues you. And in 2018, Nancy faced that threat. Without going into too much detail, she had obtained an unredacted police record of a DUI arrest of a guy who had later decided to run for state legislature, and the guy's record had been expunged, meaning it wasn't going to be made public. And however, somebody that she knew, one of those many hundreds of tipsters that reach out to her over the years, provided her with an unredacted copy of the report. And, you know, it contained a few fairly unflattering bits of information about the candidate. And so she was threatened with a lawsuit. She did her due diligence, you know. She prepared to publish the story. She talked to a whole bunch of different reporters and editors that I'm aware of anyway, and her board. And she, you know, she did what we do. She just sort of faced it down and said, all right, well, this could end up destroying the whole thing and costing me anything that I have left in terms of investments or funding. And she went ahead and did it anyway. I mean, it's, you know, I'm pretty sure she told me back then that I think she had less than a month of operating funds. Let's see. Yeah, and you know, it's at least $5,000 to retain an attorney, to start responding to litigation. So, you know, it was the big question, and it was a lawsuit that we all kind of knew was bogus. It was designed to just intimidate her into not running a story. So, yeah, she was fearless. She was absolutely fearless. Let's see. You know, the lawsuit eventually was filed. We don't have to go into a lot of detail about that. It was filed against her and the Norwalk Police Department. And, she won. She's still here. Nancy on Norwalk is still here. She persevered through that, despite the stress that it brought to her life. I'll just say it again. Nancy on Norwalk is still here. It's amazing. The Society of Professional Journalists gave her the First Amendment Award that year. And, not for nothing, but there was other competition for that award. It was a story, a whole project from the Hartford Courant. One of the best reporters in Connecticut had worked on it for months. And there was another big project, I think, from the Connecticut Mirror, and she beat him. It was amazing. So I was just real happy to be there at the dinner with other folks to see her get it. And so just to echo what other folks have said, I can guarantee that most of the residents of Norwalk have no idea how lucky they were to have her around. Yeah, so fearless, tireless, honest, and just a remarkable person. And there's a lot of folks who go into news to be on television. They're gregarious, they're outgoing, they're good looking, they're super smart, and they're introverts like Nancy and myself. And we stay behind the keyboard. But the value is still just as good, if not better. There's more detail. It gives us the opportunity to dive in deeper. And there's just a whole world of people that reporters meet. We meet so many people. It's hard to remember them all, but we really do. Like, if you cover a town, over a few years, you end up knowing you've met thousands of people, and that is a gift. So, she was lucky, and so was Norwalk. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your memories. We're going to take a little reflection break. So before we close, I'd like to open it up to anyone else who'd like to share a story or memory of Nancy. And the first one is Zach Gunther, her nephew.
Give me a second. It's coming up there. Good afternoon. I am Zachary Gunther. I'm Nancy's nephew. I would just like to thank the museum here for hosting us again, unfortunately, but thank you regardless. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff I wrote down here was already gone over, but so Nancy was a very interesting person. She's a fighter. There's no doubt about that. A lot of people in this room know that. The eye roll, as I saw that a lot, something I always remember and kind of miss because it was funny every time she did it. When I saw the paintings over there, it brought to mind something that I was trying to figure out how to kind of go over, something that I don't think many people went over. When I saw those paintings, it really reminded me of how much traveling she did and just the attention to detail. Those are the same exact road signs you see on the side of the highways, which I thought was very cool. I'm a big fan of New York City. I don't live there, but I would love to live there. My dad knows. He hears me talk about New York City all the time. But another thing I would like to go over is her love for cats. That was a big thing, and she's part of the reason why I'm so into cats now. She rescued several cats while I was young and as I got older, and I don't think they're ever going to go away because there's more cats, more cats, more cats. We lose one, we get another one. We lose one, we get another one. Grammy Gunther and Aunt Barb would know that. I would also like to say for my little cousin and my cousin Melody, who can't not be here, unfortunately. I felt really bad for that. But if they're watching, I would like to say that you guys also were very interesting in Nancy's life. Sagan, if you're watching, Nancy really did care about you. You were like her granddaughter that she never really had. And I hope you remember that. Nancy really did like you. And Melody did so much to help the family, and she does still do a lot to help my grandmother. She's always there to cook for her, help her along with my aunt. She does a lot. And I'm trying to think what I could read off here that wasn't said. Her love for photography, that wasn't talked about much. She caught some of the best pictures of me that I have till this day. She had a way of making herself not known that she was taking a picture of me. And when it's not noticed I'm getting my picture taken, it's some of my best pictures, because I hate getting my picture taken. But she was a fighter, and she'll always be remembered as one. She fought till the very end. She always thought that she was gonna beat it, but unfortunately she lost the last battle. But she will always be remembered through Nancy on Norwalk, which was a big part of her life. The people of Norwalk is her second home, so everybody from Norwalk who's here, thank you very much. You guys meant so much to my aunt. You know, journalism and being a journalist can be hard at times. It can be very hard because you get a bunch of the criticism, as we see pretty typically out there. But she always took it in stride and never let it beat her down. She always seemed to make her stronger. And I have a couple of stories. personal stories that I would like to share real quick. The last time I saw Mark and Nancy together will always be in my mind. I still see it very vividly. The last time we saw them both together, we were coming back from Target. I made my dad go over there, and I used to get some food as an excuse to look at toy cars. But as we were coming back in, we had a massive thunderstorm happen in South Jersey, and I hold by my belief that lightning struck the tree 50 feet away from me. It was loud. But as I walked in, Nancy and Mark walked out and sat on the back porch, and they just looked off as the rain and the lightning happened. I told my dad, I was like, how can they do that? But that's who they were. They were always together, and they had a bond and a trust in each other that not a lot of people have, and they were always there, and she missed them a lot, and it's nice to know that they're back together again. One more story. The biggest eye roll I ever saw out of my aunt was during the 2020 Daytona 500, when a certain somebody showed up to the event, and she ranted and raved and walked out of the room. She couldn't even watch it. Again, one of the funniest stories I have to tell of her. The eye roll, the rant, yeah, but that's all I have to say. I had a whole paper here, but I had to try and find something that wasn't said, and I think I did that. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to say something to the family. I actually did not know Nancy well. I don't think in all these years we ever had a conversation, but we were always in a room together many times. I'm currently Connecticut Secretary of the State, but 6 years ago I was a shy Jersey girl, something I didn't know we had in common. And one of the very first times I had to speak publicly, and the thought of speaking in front of the media was very scary, because politicians and the media are not always a natural mix. And, I gave my speech, and Nancy was there, of course, right up front, taking photos, which also is very nerve-wracking when it happens for the first time. And our eyes met for a moment, but in that moment, and I've never spoken about this ever, she looked at me with a look of surprise and a wry smile that made me feel like, hey, I've not seen this before in politics. Something about you is different. And maybe I made that up in my head, because that's what I believe about myself. But in that moment, it gave me both confidence to keep going on my journey, but also I realize now, looking back, it set the standard that I expect to see from all press, all members of the press. And now that my playing field is a little larger and I come into contact with many members, it occurs to me that we shouldn't take that integrity for granted. She was a special person, and that is not repeated everywhere. So I just want to say to the family that, people have profound impacts on our lives. We don't always know it. She didn't know she had that impact on me, but she did. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Diane. I'm one of many Dianes in Norwalk. We can never have enough. That would elicit an eye roll with Nancy when I would say that. I wanted to thank the care team. You know who you are. I was going to ask for everyone to stand, but no need. Many of you cared for Nancy in many different ways. But there was a core team that we would text each other. And I wanted to say how amazed I was at the board of directors of Nancy on Norwalk. They loved Nancy and did amazing things to keep her spirits up, to help her with her medical issues. It was amazing. We would be so lucky to have a board of directors if you are to start a not-for-profit. I just wanted to give a couple of little stories. One thing about cats. I did not trust that cats could actually be friends with humans for many years, because I had cat scratches, I had met people's cats. They weren't that particular, so they don't really at times care. But when I shared, for about 5 years, many of you don't know this, but I was a housemate of Diane and John. And when they were still in New York City, I would take care of the place, and they adopted this huge orange cat. And he was, I felt that he had been abused. He was so happy to be at Diane and John's house, and for those of you that have been to their house for many of the fundraisers and the friend raisers, it's a great place. He was very happy. His name was Rilka, named after the poet by one of their care team with the kids, and he came to inhabit the place. It ended up that we became good buddies, and I found that this cat would not scratch me. In fact, he was more like a dog and follow me around. So I told this to Nancy, and she again gave that wry smile because she had found the special sauce to be friends to all cats. So on occasion, I would send her cat videos, especially towards the end of her life, because on the web, there are some amazing cat videos that are, she loved them, but to a point. I could tell that she was having difficulties when she just wouldn't answer back or let me know she saw them. So that's one of the things. When she was at Autumn Lake between hospital visits, I would take her in a wheelchair and we would run, or I would try to run with her up and down the road. And we were able to find a little kitty that was on the side of the street near Autumn Lake. So on occasion when I would be able to take her wheelchair, we would look for that cat, and she really got excited seeing the cat. And this is a woman who is in pain and scared about her future. But I saw her face light up about the cat. So she was a cat crazy lady, but proud of it. The other thing is a bucket list issue that we both shared. This speaks to her stick-to-itiveness. And that is, we both felt we wanted to see the 9/11, you know those blue lights that they shoot up into the heavens? So beautiful, very impactful of that horrible day. Well, we decided we wanted to go to Sherwood Island to check it out because that is one of the places where you, on a clear day, see Manhattan and the blue lights. Well, we went there in her car and it was closed. So we said, let's go to Greenwich, Todd Point, I guess it is. They wouldn't let us in, we're not from Greenwich. So we ended up going from place to place where we knew we might be able to see it. And we ended up at City Island. Couldn't see it from there. So we thought, okay, let's keep going. And we ended up, wouldn't you know it, right at the base of the 9/11 memorial, of which I took a photo because I was riding shotgun, she was driving, we were trying not to get stopped or anything. I couldn't find that photo for the slideshow you're gonna see later, but it was this very special moment and spoke to her stick-to-itiveness. Lastly, I wanted to say that one thing that she was really great, she loved a scoop, she loved gossip, and a scoop. Keep those scoops coming. I hope the board of directors and the family are gonna save her laptop. It contains treasure. For those of us that would on occasion give her scoops, I'm a night owl too, so I would call her. She would let me put in a late night letter to the editor and sometimes would ask me my opinion about some things. I just want to tell you that I hope the investigative side of all journalism continues. I want to say I was so proud of her and the board and all of Norwalk when she would scoop the multi-million, maybe billion-dollar Hearst Corporation, scoops about Norwalk, good stories and others that maybe were a little testy, but she would scoop them. I think that is a major legacy. And lastly, she has so many more stories to tell, and I hope to meet Ashley, and I thank the board of directors and the family for letting her legacy continue. This is my purple hat that I wore in her memory.
Hi, my name is Michael Gunther. I'm the youngest of the four of us, and I had no plans at all to speak today, but I felt compelled a little bit just to say a couple things. One of the things is that I do is that I'm kind of the family historian for us, and a lot of things were talked about, you know, it's like, it kept reminding me of that saying about how the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You know, and examples in our own family, you know, cats. I and Nancy love cats, and we all love cats, pretty much, almost all of us. And one of the things I found is that pictures of my grandfather, my mom's father, and his mother and his aunt all holding cats in Atlantic City from like 100 and some years ago. You know, so it's not strange, you know, and I know my mom had cats when she was young. And, you know, there was a lot of talk about Nancy and photography. Her father, he had a little dark room in the house, from what I'm told. There's a bunch of pictures that he developed, and he would share pictures with one of his coworkers who was also into amateur photography. And, you know, her artistic talent, I mean, it's like, I didn't think of it, but I should have, if I had, I would have bought one of her paintings or something of Jimmy Doohan, the guy who was Scotty in Star Trek, because she was like one of the leading members. There was the JDIFC, the James Doohan International Fan Club, and she actually drew several of the covers for it. You know, it's like, and she did. But artistic talent, you know, and it kind of runs in the family some too. It was like my grandmom Gunther, her father was a cake maker. And I actually just recently, just in the last few weeks, I found a 100-year-old newspaper article where he talked to a reporter, and he said he's the best cake maker he said he was the best cake maker in the country, and that he had made cakes for the royal families of Germany, the Habsburgs and the Hohenzollerns. And, you know, I don't know if any of that's true. I think he was probably making a good story even better, but he was pretty good. And there's a great-great-great-grandmother on my mom's side who, you know, she was 1890s. They were writing newspaper stories about, you know, what a great quilt maker she was. You know, how she was making quilts, you know, for almost everybody in their family. Unfortunately, none of them has survived, but, you know, to be mentioned, like, at that time, you know, it's like, she must have been really good, you know. And the last thing a lot of people touched on is her determination, and that's also a family trait too. My great-grandfather, Gunther, his name was Michael Gunther too. By the time he was 40, he had lost 2 wives and all of his children. And the woman who baked the cake for his second wedding in Philadelphia, actually, she decided she was going to marry him. She was a young widow. And she had to convert. She grew up Lutheran, and she had to become Catholic to marry him. And that was a big thing, you know. It was, in Germany at that time, it was like there were areas like, you know, Catholics were in this part of the country over here, and the Lutherans were over there, and they didn't really mix it all together. So it was a big thing for her, and she just had that determination to do it, and it worked out because, you know, there's a lot of Gunthers because of her and her determination. You know. And Nancy got a good part of that too. As far as the eye rolls, I don't know anything about that, but I'm going to credit Mom's Irish side of the family for that because they should get credit for something. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, I had extensive notes here, was we were riding over here. I had to go over to Walmart before I came here because I forgot my suit. And I had to buy this shirt, and so I had something decent to wear. And we're driving on this little hilly road in town here where there's like lots of fences, big little stone fences about yay high. And I don't know why, but all of a sudden I thought of the song Turn, Turn, Turn. It just popped into my head for a second.
Yeah.
And I think that was Nancy. I think Nancy wanted somebody to know that she was still here with us. I don't believe in coincidences. I personally believe that coincidences are a higher power keeping himself anonymous. So just to have that happen, thank you, and God bless you, Nancy, and God bless all of you for being here. You really made this a home for her, Norwalk a home for her, and she needed that. And I really do appreciate that for us. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this very brief. I am Val, Nancy's sister-in-law, wife of Clarence over there, the oldest child. I want to take this opportunity to say how extremely grateful the family is for the help and the support of what they called themselves, the care team for Nancy. Most of them are members of the board of directors. They're also friends who've known her for a very long time. It is amazing what they did to help her and help the family. None of us live close to her. Clarence and I live in Maryland, about 4.5 to 5 hours away. A lot of the family is in South Jersey, about 2.5 to 3 hours away. And when she became sick, all of her care was pretty much up in Connecticut. And if it were not for that care team, I don't know what we would have done. We were not in a position to be close enough to give her the level of support and care that she needed. And they spared there was nothing that they wouldn't do. I mean, everything from paperwork, contracts, to fighting with the rehab center to get whatever care they could get her. Helping Eric, and Eric had his hands full. It was amazing what Eric did to help her. Without going into details, just trust me, it was amazing. And I cannot tell you how immensely grateful we are. So I just wanted to make you aware of that the extreme, over-the-top efforts that they went through. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
So this is something I've never seen before, but it was striking to me because Nancy's veganism was both about her love of animals and her love of life and the earth. And I didn't know Nancy for many years when I knew of her reputationally, and I used to see her taking photographs of various different public events. And, she was an observer, a keen observer of people. Even when she hadn't spoken to them, she was watching who was where and what they were doing. And so as time went along, we got to know each other because John was on the board, and he and I adopted some feral cats from a rescue. And she actually coaxed them when they escaped and ran down into our basement and wouldn't come out. She sat and waited with little nibbles and called them and coaxed them, and they actually came out. And we thought, oh, you know, we have a chance to civilize them. So that beauty and care and tenderness that she showed for animals, she also had inside for all of her loved ones, and family being the most important in her life. But I'm raising this now because I got the food from the Norwalk Center for the Arts. She loved the arts. She was mostly solitary when you think about it in her professional life, but she was a clear, in my mind, an existentialist, where she brought meaning to her life through her vocation and through her relationships. And so everything on the table is vegan except for the curry chicken mini sandwiches that you're gonna have. And so she wasn't judgy about what other people do, but she really did live the way she believed people should live. So I just wanted to honor this both visually and verbally, because the other thing is, you'll also notice this is unusual for public events, but we have compostable cups, which you're going to see near the Perrier, and we have stainless steel cutlery, and we're going to have a big box at the end of the food that you can just put your food waste in, because Nancy, before composting was available for her multifamily building, used to bring it to my compost pile. So we developed a relationship over her wanting to preserve the nutrients in her food waste so much that she would drive them up to my house. First she'd freeze them in her freezer, and then she would drive them to my house, and we would talk about it. And we would talk about how the world needs to change in order to preserve this wonderful world we have. So the last thing I'll say is, during the last parts of her illness, there were multiple surgeries, and the oncologist, his name began with D, and we began to call him Dr. Doom, because he would say, you know, you're very unlikely to survive this surgery. You know, and he would just tell her straight, because he'd done it so many times for so many people, and she still wanted to live so much that she was willing to undergo all these surgeries, and she did survive. And we used to talk about how the will to live, in a lot of cases, determines your longevity when you're struggling with something. So she really did love life and want to live it, and she made the world a better place while she was here. So I'm just thrilled I was part of her life.
Is there anyone else who'd like to say something? I didn't know Nancy very well. She attended some of our humanist events. I'm the president of Humanists and Freethinkers of Fairfield County. And I was always encouraging her to come socially, not professionally, not to cover us, but to come to a solstice party and relax and enjoy herself. So we would have a few shared emails on that correspondence. I always admired her determination, commitment, and I was really saddened to learn of her illness and death. So may we all understand that the journey of grief is long and different for each person. Each one of you will find your own path to get through the next hour, the next day, the next week. Each step will be full of gratitude for Nancy's life, her courage to go against the odds, to speak truth, her humor, her love of family and community, mixed in with sadness for her leaving us so soon. Eventually, the times we grieve will grow further apart and shorter of duration, while our fears we might forget will dissipate. Our memories of her will grow stronger, and the past, with all its meaning and beauty, is sacred and secure. And I'd like to leave you with a poem by Michael Shepard called A Grief Ago. There is no grief which time does not lessen or soften, so said Cicero, a man so often right, a Stoic, those for whom all life presents a lesson to be learned from and then to move on from. But I wonder about all this. Is grief ever lessened or softened? Is it not perhaps overlaid in our so various ways? For some, grief framed and falsified to ease that grief. For some, like hyacinths and crocus bulbs, left in a dark cupboard in the autumn of our grief to respond to time and become at last themselves. Gently, gently, the covers pulled over the loving bed, the true, the pure, the lovely, painful grief, the memory deep cherished, gently, gently folded into the cupboards of the heart, there to be known without the door disturbed until the time, a grief ago, as Dylan wrote, the cupboard opened only for love's sake, without grief, those carefully folded memories brought out and loved and lived a while. Not grief, but the pure memory of grief. And behold, life. This concludes our service. May you find peace in your memories and take care of one another. You're invited to stay for this wonderful reception.